Hilchos Pesulei Hamukdashin Perek Chi'i, the laws of disqualified sacrifices, chapter 9. We continue today to discuss the more complex, subtle topic of mix-ups in bird sacrifices. Remembering always that the core issue at hand is the fact that a chatas, a sin offering of a bird, has to be offered on the bottom of the mizbeach, and oila, a burnt bird offering, has to be offered on the top of the mizbeach. And so when there's mix-ups, you can never just do whatever you want, because one of them has to be brought in this way, and the other has to be brought in that way. And every pair has two birds. One's going to be a chatas, one's going to be an oila. Even where non-designated pairs of birds get mixed up, each non-designated pair on its own needs to be half chatas and half oila, which causes some problems, as we saw yesterday. And today we're going to really get more into that, the undesignated pairs of birds. As the commentaries try to differentiate between the last chapter and this one, the last chapter is more occupied with what's called mefureshes, a pair of bird which has already been designated. You know which is the chatas, you know which is the oila, even though there was one case yesterday of non-designated. But mostly today's chapter is going to be about issues with non-designated pairs of birds, even though we're also going to be talking a little bit about designated pairs of birds and how they interplay with the non-designated ones. So with that, let's get to some more cases of bird mix-ups. It says that Rambam halacha aleph kain stuma. We have a pair of birds which is non-designated. So here we have two birds. Again, one of these is going to become a chatas, one of them is going to become an oila. Sheparach mimeno goizel la'avir. And one of the birds flies away. It's what birds do, they can fly. So now you're left with only one bird. What do you do with it? Or one of the birds took a flight and landed up in a group of birds that are all consigned to die. As we saw yesterday, for example, if a chatas bird mixes with oila birds and you don't know which is which, they all have to die. So let's say, again, imagine the temple premises, it's very busy, a bunch of people bringing different pairs of birds. So on the side here, you have a group of birds that are going to be left to die because they're a mix-up of a chatas and an oila. On this side, you have two birds that are non-designated. One of them takes a flight and jumps into the death row of birds, essentially. These birds are all supposed to die. So of course, the bird that jumped in is also going to die because you don't know which one it is. But what do you do with the original bird? Or a third scenario, one of the birds in the non-designated pair died. The point is, in all these three scenarios, there's only one remaining bird left. Since it's non-designated, says the Rambam, yikach zug lasheni. You simply take a pair for the remaining one. Go back to the bird store, get another bird, and bring this pair of birds as it's supposed to be, chatas and oila. Now the truth is, as the commentaries point out, the same law really applies to a kain mefureshes, a pair of birds where they've already been designated. Let's say you have one chatas and one oila. You already know this is going to be the burnt offering, this is going to be the sin offering, and one of them takes flight. Or one of them ends up in another group of birds that are going to die. Or one of them dies. Since you have the other one, and you know what it is, let's say the chatas flew away and then you're left with the oila, just bring a second bird and bring it as a chatas. Or if it was the oila that flew away and the chatas that remained, bring another bird and offer it as an oila. And the commentaries do point that out, that the Rambam could have said the same law in a case of a designated pair of birds. However, there are 2 points to be made. One, since the rest of the chapter deals mostly with non-designated birds, so the Rambam chose to phrase this law about non-designated birds. That's the Mari Kurkus explanation. Others also point to the Gemara, which says that if you have a kain mefureshes, if you have a pair of birds that have already been designated, yes, it's true, if you would know which one took flight, or you would know which one disappeared, or you would know which one died, then you could bring a second pair for the other one. But what if you didn't know? What if you had a chatas and an oila, one of them took flight, you don't know if the chatas or the oila took flight. Now it's not so simple to just say yikach zug lasheni, because you don't know what the remaining one is. It's supposed to be an oila or a chatas. Therefore, you can't just say this law in a blanket way. Therefore, the Rambam phrased it only with a kain stuma, only with a non-designated pair of birds. Halacha beis, let's consider a fourth possibility. Till now we talked about, again, an undesignated pair of birds from which one bird either flew away, ended up in a dying group, or died. What if parach lebein akrevis? What if this bird flew into another group of birds that was also supposed to be offered? The Rambam will soon choose an example of 10 birds. So I put 10 on the screen. If this undesignated bird flies into a group of 10 also undesignated birds, the rule is pasul upaisel echad kenegdai. It becomes disqualified, and it also disqualifies another one in the group corresponding to it. Because the rule is, when a bird flies in from an undesignated pair amongst other birds that are supposed to be offered, pasul upaisel echad kenegdai, it always disqualifies itself plus one more. Ketzat. How does this play out practically? Let's see. Parach gezel min asasum la'asara eifes tumes. Again, a bird from a non-designated pair flew into a group of 10 non-designated birds. What's the Kohen going to do? So obviously, if we could do a magic wand and undo the mixture, this core group of 10 birds, what's going to happen to them? 5 are going to be offered on bottom, 5 are going to be offered on top. That's obvious. Now that there's an 11th bird, to mitigate risk, the Kohen's going to do either 6 and 5 or 5 and 6. You wouldn't want to do any other variation because any other variation is already playing with the core group. That there has to be 5 and 5 is for sure. The additional one is either going to go on top or on bottom. So let's consider, says the Rambam, both cases. Im asa chamisha lemata v'shisha lemayla. If you chose to perform 5 on bottom and 6 on top. What happens here is basically the Kohen is hoping that this additional one is the bird that flew in. So he's bringing 5 on bottom, 5 on top. That covers the core group wonderfully. And the one that flew in, we'll offer it on top as an oila. The problem with this is, as the commentaries explain, twofold. First of all, how do you know that the one that flew in is supposed to be an oila? Maybe it's supposed to be a chatas and you brought it wrong, so you've disqualified that one. Plus, who told you that the 11th bird is the one that flew in? Maybe this is the one that flew in, and now you've messed up the core group. Instead of bringing the core group as 5 and 5, you brought it as 6 and 4. So you disqualified now 2 birds. As the Rambam says it, Im asa chamisha lemata v'shisha lemayla. If you did 5 on bottom and 6 on top, hare chamish eilis ksheris me'ashisha shel mayla. I can only kosherize 5 out of 6 of the birds on top. The arba chatois kshera me'achamisha oifes shenasu lemata, and I can only kosherize 4 of the chatas birds on the bottom out of the 5. Shani Aimer, because I can always say Shema hagezel pereach echad mechamisha shel mata. Maybe the one that flew in is one of the 5, and it was supposed to be brought as a burnt offering. And here you brought it as a sin offering. You've disqualified it. Oh, maybe this is the bird that flew in and it was a burnt offering. No, maybe it was a sin offering. It's supposed to be on bottom. You don't know. So one of each has to be disqualified. Same thing in the opposite scenario. And by the way, some texts have halacha gimel beginning here. Others texts have it beginning later. Similarly, if you did 6 on bottom and 5 on top. Again, hoping against hope that you're hitting a lucky strike and you're doing the core group 5 and 5, and this is the additional bird. But you don't know that. First of all, maybe the additional bird is supposed to be brought over here. So you disqualified that one. And plus, maybe this is the additional bird that was supposed to be brought down there, and you brought it on top, messing up the core group 6 and 4 instead of 5 and 5. Now you disqualified them. Again, nimtzeis, it turns out, hakosher chamish chatois v'arba elios, you only have 5 out of the 6 on the bottom kosher and 4 out of 5 on the top kosher. Shani Yemer, because I can always say, Shema hagezel mechamisha shel mayla, maybe the bird that flew in was belonging to the 5 on top, and you put it on the bottom where it wasn't supposed to be. Nimtzeis hakosher meha asara tisha. So in total, from the original 10, only 9 are going to be kosher, plus the one that flew in is disqualified. Hare pasal echad. So you see that the bird that flew in, besides from disqualifying itself, also disqualified one more in the group that it flew into. Halacha gimel. This is where some texts begin halacha gimel. Others, as I mentioned before, begin a couple lines before. But it's a new case. Arba oifes tumais v'arba oifes shniyais tumais. You have 2 pairs of 4 birds, non-designated. 2 of these should be a chatas and 2 of these should be an oila. 2 of these should be a chatas and 2 of these should be an oila. Parach echad min harishaynis lashniyas. One of them from this group flies into the neighboring group. Watch what happens. Instead of 4 and 4, now we have 3 and 5. Pasal echad min ashniyas. In this moment, the flying bird has disqualified itself plus 1. As we just explained in the last case of 10 birds, same principle of 5 birds. What are you going to do with the 5 birds? Divide them 3 and 2. You're losing 1 on top and 1 on bottom. Divide them 2 and 3, you also lose 1 on top and 1 on bottom. So 2 will become disqualified. Now, after they got mixed, one bird goes back to the original group. So we're back to 4 and 4. Now, if somehow we could know that it's the same original bird, so of course everything is fine, but we don't. And since we don't, we have to keep 2 disqualified in this group. And we have to also assume that as the bird flies into the next group, it disqualifies itself plus another one. Pasal echad min harishaynis, and now disqualifies one of the first ones. V'nimtza hakosher min harishaynis shtayim bilvad. Now there's only 2 left that are kosher over here. 2 left here, 2 left here. Says the Rambam an interesting thing. Chazar echad uparach min harishaynis lashniyos. If now, at this point, 2 have been disqualified from each group. If at this point, 1 bird flies back to the second group, afilu kol hayom, even if they keep on mixing back and forth all day, you cannot disqualify more than this. As we saw yesterday, even if these 8 birds all got mixed up into one pile, mechza kosher to mechza pasal kamesha b'yarnu, always half will end up being kosher and half will end up being disqualified, as we explained. What did we explain yesterday? What are you going to do with these birds? If you put them all on top of the mizbeach, well, 4 of them were supposed to be on top, and they'll be the kosher ones, half of the 8. Put them all on bottom, you're going to get half of the 8 again that were supposed to be on bottom. If you divide them half and half, since they were all non-designated, so even if you say that all of the 4 of one pair ended up on top, and all of the 4 of one pair ended up on the bottom, well, 2 were supposed to be on bottom and 2 were supposed to be on top. If you mix them in different variations of different pairs, you're always going to end up with 2 that are kosher on bottom and 2 that are kosher on top. So you'll always have 4 out of 8 birds that'll be kosher. So no matter how much they keep getting mixed, it's always going to be 4 kosher and 4 disqualified. Halacha hey, this scenario was where the 2 pairs that got mixed were both of even numbers. But what if the pairs were of non-even numbers? And now that Rambam chooses the case which is described by the Mishnah, a very interesting, funny to imagine case, but we're going to go with it just to bring out the principles of the law that are underpinning this halacha. Halacha hey, we deal with 7 piles of birds. Pay close attention here. Tzibur echad yesh bei shnei oifos. One pile of bird has 2 birds. Uvasheni arba, the second one has 4 birds. Ubashlishi shisha, the third pile has 6 birds. Ubarevi shmeina, the fourth pile has 8 birds. Ubachamishi asara, the fifth pile has 10 birds. Ubashishi shnei masar, the sixth pile has 12 birds. Ubashvi arba asar, and the seventh one has 14 birds. And for argument's sake, just to bring out the law, we're going to say, Uparach goizal min harishena lashniya, a bird flew from group A to group B, ve'echad min hashniya lashlishis, then from group B to group C, umishlishis larevias, then from group C to group D, merevias lachamishias from group D to group E, umechamishish lishishis from group E to group F, umishishis lishvias, and from group F to group G. So consistently, one bird hopped out of each group into the next group. Then, again, all for the purpose of the law, v'chazar echad uparach mitzibur litzibur, one bird jumped backwards from pile to pile, ad shechazar l'rishayna sheparach mimena rishayna, till it goes back to the first one, which the first bird had flown out from to begin with. So you end back up in the same amount of birds in each pile, but you have no idea if these are the original birds. Because here a bird popped out of this one, went into this one. Now there's 5 birds. Then this bird popped out here and went here. So 4 birds remain here, but there's 7. And then one bird skipped to there. And then they came back. At any point, many of these birds could have mixed up. Says the Rambam, we apply the same rule of a bird flying from non-designated to non-designated. Each entering bird disqualifies one bird from the group as it enters and one bird as it comes back. So as this bird from group A hopped into group B, 2 birds from group B became disqualified, itself and another one from the group. One of these flies into this one, 2 became disqualified, and so on and so forth. On the journey this way, 2 became disqualified. One ends up in this group, so 2 will also be disqualified. Now, a bird from this group flies back to the next group. It's going to disqualify 2 more birds. So 4 birds have now been disqualified from here. Notice only 2 were disqualified here. Because once it flew out, it can't do anything bad to this group. It just keeps the 2 that are disqualified. But 4 are disqualified here. When that bird enters this one, another 2, so that's 4. Same thing over here, 4. Same thing over here, 4. Same thing over here, 4. All the middle groups have 4 birds disqualified. And when it jumps back here, only 2 are disqualified. So 2 and 2 have been disqualified on this side, but 4 have been disqualified in all the middle groups. Therefore, says the Rambam, Harishayna v'hashniya ein lahem klum. The first group and the second group remain with nothing. Here, follow the X's. These 2 have been disqualified when the bird flew in at the end. These 4 have been disqualified on the way in and on the way back. Even though we said before in the last halacha that when you have 4 birds, half will always be kosher, that's only when the mixture is coming from just one direction. But if it's from 2 different pairs of birds, each one has its own individual effect, disqualifies 2 on the way in and 2 on the way back. So 4 have been disqualified here. Group 3 only has 2 birds remaining because 4 have been disqualified. The fourth group has 4 birds remaining because 4 were disqualified. V'hachamishis yesh lashisha, the fifth group, has 6 birds remaining because 4 have been disqualified. V'hashishis yesh lashmeina, the sixth group has 8 birds remaining because 4 have been disqualified. V'hashviyis yesh lashne masr, but the seventh group only had 2 disqualified on the way in. Nothing was disqualified on the way out, and therefore it has 12 birds remaining. Then says that Rambam, the same thing happened. Chazar echad uparach pam shniya mizulazu. Again, the birds are still in position. One bird hopped from each group this way, and then hopped from each group that way. And before we go on, I must point to an important debate in the commentaries right here. Did this second case also involve groups 1 and 2? The simple understanding is that it did. All the birds jumped back and forth from the groups. But the Mari Kurkus points out that if this were true, once this entire group has been consigned to die, if any of these birds end up in another group, that whole group is going to be disqualified. They're all going to have to die. According to the Mari Kurkus, when Rambam says Chazar echad uparach pam shniya, it only begins from group 3. Where there are kosher birds, that's where the discussion is concerned. However, the Haramiriya, another important commentator here, says no. Even though these groups have been fully disqualified, they're not actually consigned to die in a regular way that a bird is consigned to die. As a matter of fact, you're going to end up bringing all these birds on the altar, according to the Haramiriya. It just won't count for the owners. And therefore, the Chazar Uparach, this case could actually be applying also to group A and B as well, that the entire thing repeated itself. One bird hopped from each group, and then one bird hopped back from each group. But the principle is the same. Regardless, in this group and the last group, the first and last that have kosher ones remaining, only get 2 birds disqualified. Just like in the original scenario, groups 1 and 7 had 2 birds disqualified, everyone else had 4. Here 2. 2 additional birds get disqualified here and at the end, and 4 in the middle. And therefore, so again, second time, right? One bird went this way, and then one bird went that way. It keeps on disqualifying one bird as it leaves, and one bird as it comes. Leaving us with the following. Groups 3 and 4 now have lost all their birds. They have nothing left, because 2 more were disqualified here, 4 more over here. Group 5, which began with 10 birds and lost 4 more birds now, only has 2 kosher birds left. The 6th group, which began with 12 and lost 4 more now, only has 4 kosher birds left. The 7th group only lost 2 more, so it has 10 kosher birds. If this happened the third time, the birds flew back and forth, and again, same argument. Mari Kurkus will say it's only involving these 3 groups. Haramiriel will say it involves all 7 groups. But the point is, they went back and forth, and it's unclear why the Rambam here calls it shlishis v'revius, a third and fourth time. The first 2 times it was just going back and forth was called one time. Here it's called third and fourth times for whatever reason. But the point is that it went back and forth. So now, again, Pesel echad b'halichase ve'echad b'chazirase, they disqualify one bird on its way in and one bird on its way back. Hachamishis v'hashishis nifselu kulan. At this point, we have the worst scenario. 5 and 6 have lost all their birds. V'hashviyis nishadu l'shmeina ifis kshedim. Number 7 only loses 2 more birds, leaving 8 kosher birds. And now, kishayasar ba'asar sheva l'mayla v'sheva l'mata. When the Kohen will take this group of 14 birds and split them, 7 up and 7 on bottom, we're going to declare 8 kosher and 6 disqualified because of the mixture of these birds that flew in and out and back and forth that disqualified that amount of birds. We don't know which are the disqualified ones, but after the procedure is done, we'll just say 8 are kosher and 6 are disqualified. Halacha Vav, I don't have the slides, but we'll use our trusty rubber duckies from yesterday. Halacha Vav, kain stuma, vekain mefureshes. You have 2 sets of birds. One is, we'll call it undesignated, and one is designated. That means in this one you know, this is a chatas, this is an oila. But these 2 haven't yet been set apart. Parach minastuma lamefereshes. At this point, one bird from the non-designated pair flies into the birds that have been designated, and as the commentaries say, you lose track of everything now. Not only do you not know which is the bird that flew in, you don't even know in the original birds which is a chatas and which is an oila. So, this is obviously a problematic group over here. What do you do with this guy? Says the Rambam, Yikach Zug Lasheni, you take a partner for the second guy, and bring this pair of birds normally. Chazar, but now if one of the birds in this mixture comes back over here, or This means, as the Marikokus explains, to begin with, is a new case. Or it wasn't that the non-designated pair flew here. It was to begin with, one of the designated birds flew to the non-designated birds. And you didn't know if it was the Oila or the Chatas. So again, scenario A is where the non-designated had flown here, and now one of them is flying back. It may be an actual Oila or Chatas. Or, to begin with, it only flew from here into here. Now all the birds in the non-designated pair die. Because if it was the Oila that got mixed in, then all the Chatases are disqualified. If it was the Chatas that got mixed in, all the burnt offerings are going to be disqualified. And therefore they have to all, unfortunately, die. And even this one here, because you don't know which is which, so none of them can be brought with a partner. They are all disqualified. Halacha Zayin, we're going to introduce another birds over here. Let's bring in some more duckies. Okay. Yeah, 6 duckies here. Chatas mikan, ve'oila mikan, ustuma ba'emtza. You have a number of birds that are designated to be chatas over here. A number of birds designated to be oila over here. And a non-designated pair in the middle. Parach mina emtza latzdadin, elach echad ve'elach echad, or other texts have echad elach ve'echad elach. From the middle to the sides, one flew to each side. This is easy. Well, you've said klum. You've lost nothing. Elo yoymar, the Kohen, when he performs the procedure, should say, Zeh shehalach etz ala chatois chatas, v'zeh shehalach etz ala oilas oila. Beautiful. The bird that went to the chatas will be a chatas. The bird that went to the oila will be an oila. But now, chozar achar shenisarvu, uporach echad mikan ve'echad mikan la'emtza. Now they've been mixed already. One of them from this group flies in, and the other flies in. Now you know because you see the different colors. But again, we don't know. We don't know what just flew in. These on the side are for sure chatases. These on the side are for sure oilas. But on the middle, we don't know if it's the original non-designated ones that came back. This could be any. This can be an actual mixture of chatas and oila. So therefore, says the Rambam, the 2 middle ones have to die. Because there are chatas and oila mixed together. We don't know, they have to die. But the hatzdad in the sides, elu yikarvu chatas, ve'elu yikarvu oila keshahayu. They can still be brought as a chatas and oila. Because even if they're the non-designated ones, again, once they are removed to the side, the Kohen already declared them chatas and oila. So the sides always remain kosher, but the middle ones become disqualified. However, if after this, as the commentators explain, the ones that came to the middle a second time now flew back to the sides, now you have a real issue. Because you don't know which one flew to which side. Kulan yamusu. They all have to die. Now, I explained it just now that the 2 in the middle flew to the sides. Others want to explain that one of the birds flew into both sides. He flew here, then he flew there. But the point is the same. Now you don't know what's where. Kulan yamusu, they all have to die. Shema oila nisarva b'chatois v'chatois b'oilis. Because at this point, it's very possible for an oila to have mixed with chatases and a chatas with oilas. Because again, what happened? Let's start from the beginning. We had chatas and oila, non-designated. Non-designated flew to the sides, we declared them chatas, them oila. Now 2 came and mixed in, one here is a chatas, one here is an oila, they have to die. What if the chatas then flew here to the oila side and the oila flew to the chatas side? Now you have an oila and chatas here, chatas and oila here, they're all mixed up. And therefore none of them can be brought as a sacrifice, and unfortunately they all have to be left to die. The Tiferes Yisrael, commentary on the Mishnah, he has another reason. He says that even if, not for the fact of the mixture, once the 2 in the middle were consigned to die, when they mix with other groups, that's like any sacrifice that is consigned to die and mixing with other sacrifices, whose law also is to die. And as the Rabbi would always say, if we conclude on a negative note, we should always say Mesayim B'Tov. We conclude this chapter on a positive note, positive results, positive things. It should be a positive week for the Jewish people with good news for everybody.